Welcome to the Economy Magazine at I-24 News, where we provide a daily view on the world markets and global economy. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Coming up today, Uber's controversial ride-sharing app enters Turkey's waterways, and Dubai hosts a gala on ethical Islamic finance. Let's start now with the headlines. Well, trading resumed in China after the holidays on Thursday, opening with a solid rally, though other regional stocks moved lower. China's Shanghai index up 3%, the Hang Seng down 0.71%. Japan's Nikkei also lower 0.99%. While many market pros view the rally in Shanghai as a catch-up from the week-long holiday. In Europe, meanwhile, it was a choppy session with indices mixed by the afternoon. London's FTSE up 0.34%, Germany's DAX up 0.11%, and the French CAC down 0.17%. Meanwhile, investors eagerly watched for news out of the Fed on rates. U.S. equities indicated a lower open. At their annual meetings in Peru this week, both the IMF and World Bank indicated that they anticipate positive growth for the Western Hemisphere. This comes on the heels of disappointing projections for emerging markets. The IMF's Western Hemisphere Director, Alejandro Werner, said both organizations expect recovery.
We both anticipate that in the coming year there will be recovery and positive growth in the region. We believe that many of the region's economies are showing signs of acceleration. Faint signs, but we see them clearly.
In Belgium, tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets of Brussels on Wednesday in opposition to the government's austerity measures. Some 81,000 people turned up, making it one of the biggest demonstrations of its kind in recent years. For the most part, the rallies were peaceful, though a Belgian TV station reported a few clashes in the northern port city Antwerp.
They're taking everything from us, everything in an abominable way, and they leave us crumbs, and that cannot be accepted. It is imperative to fight to keep these social achievements and consolidate them even further. If we do not wake up today, tomorrow will be too late, and it will be a real nightmare.
Moving to the U.S., Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton said on Wednesday that she did not support the 12-nation Trans-Pacific Partnership, rejecting a central tenet of President Barack Obama's strategic pivot now to Asia. Clinton said during a campaign swing in Iowa that she is worried about currency manipulation not being part of that agreement.
Well, I have said from the very beginning that we had to have a trade agreement that would create good American jobs, raise wages, and advance our national security. And I still believe that's the high bar we have to meet.
Well, international ratings agency Moody's has affirmed Israel's A1 credit rating. In a report released Wednesday, the co-author said Israel's economic growth has outpaced that of most advanced industrial economies over the past decade, lauding high-tech exports, R&D, as well as well-educated labor force. However, the report indicated the country's economy would lose from the upside in gas reservoirs found off the country's coast, as regulatory and political considerations still remain on the table. Istanbul is the latest international metropolis to welcome the advent of Uber, this time a boat for crossing the Bosphorus Strait. Here's the story.
Istanbul's Bosphorus, a passage choked by traffic. But today, frustrated commuters have another option. American company Uber is offering an adaptation of its mobile app for cars. Starting at €15, people can cross the city's famous waterways with an Uber boat.
Here, once you confirm that you want to be picked up in this location, you just click on the Request Uber Boat button, and the signal will be forwarded to the nearest boat available.
A few minutes later, a boat seating up to 10 people arrives at the port, and it only takes 5 minutes to cross the strait, negotiating a route through the ferries and tankers.
In general, it's the big boats that get priority. We navigate around their routes.
But avoiding conventional traffic comes at a high price. Even when split between all 10 passengers, a ticket is still more pricey than a public ferry. 2 months since its launch, Uber Boat is yet to clock up as many rides as it hoped.
I use the ferry. I've never used a private boat. On the Bosphorus, you generally use the public boats to get where you want, plus it's cheap. You can even use the Istanbul travel card anywhere in the city.
For now, Uber Boat is still a niche market for people with the money to spare, those in a hurry, and simply lovers of the Bosphorus, hoping to enjoy a Kodak moment.
Investors, especially in the U.S., will be watching the Fed minutes set to be released at 2 p.m. local time on Thursday. For insight now on what to look for, we are joined on set by Iran Peleg of Clarity Capital. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, given all the weakness that we've seen with the economy and the turbulence in the markets and all these recent Fed statements, what can we expect today?
So, I mean, I think that the Fed has their upcoming meeting towards the end of October. That's what people are really going to be looking for at the moment, or looking at. And I think that most likely that given the weak data, but also the general economic conditions, which are, the growth has improved in the U.S. in recent years, but it's still fairly moderate. Inflation is still very low. I mean, the preferred inflation measure that the Fed looks at, which is called the core PCE, is only up 1.3% year on year. That's much below the Fed's target, which is 2%. I think that the Fed can wait and with interest rate increases. The market, I think, is pretty much in agreement with that view now. I mean, when we look at the futures contracts, for example, at the moment, factoring in less than a 10% probability that the Fed will raise rates at the end of October. Next meeting, December, the probabilities are probably higher. The market is saying somewhere around maybe 37% at the moment. All in all, we're coming from a place where several months ago, earlier in the year, people saw this thing, the start of the rate hike cycle in the U.S. as a highly probable thing this year. And the Fed actually said that they will raise rates in 2015. At the moment now, the market's giving it less than a 50% chance for 2015.
And is this mostly because of the turbulence that we saw in the Chinese markets? Was that the big swing here in sentiment?
So, I mean, that's kind of, obviously, that was very important. I mean, China is an important economy today. The growth momentum there has slowed considerably over the last couple of years. Just, 4 or 5 years ago, China was growing at 10, 11, 12%, and now it's slowed down to 6, 7%. It's not just China. There's weakness in the entire kind of emerging markets complex driven by China, and the concern is that is obviously dragging down global growth. But
we still saw positive reports coming from the IMF about the Western Hemisphere and the growth there in these developed countries. So why is there so much emphasis here on the emerging markets?
So it's true. I mean, that the IMF just earlier this week have updated their forecast. They did downgrade global growth somewhat from 3.3% to 3.1% for 2015, and also 2016 from 3.8 to 3.6, if I'm not mistaken. It's really been dragged down by emerging markets. As you say, developed markets seem reasonably stable, but there are, you have to watch to see if there's any spillover effects. And we've seen, for example, even, we've seen the jobs report in the U.S. on Friday. That was much weaker than expected. So I think the Fed and the market is still monitoring the economic data for signs to see whether there's a spillover from emerging markets to developed markets.
Right, that is an important factor here. When do you expect, though, this rate hike to actually occur? In 2016, early 2016?
I would say most likely in the first quarter of 2016. No, I can't rule out December. I don't think October will happen. December is possible, but I would say most likely in 2016. I think the Fed wants to start moving rates higher. It's a matter of, first of all, it's a matter of credibility as well. I mean, as I said before, they've been talking about it for so long. They kind of want to, be seen as keeping their word. Also, I mean, the uncertainty around U.S. monetary policy is actually a factor of risk within markets at the moment. And if what they're looking for, to some extent, is also, to stabilize things after some of the turmoil that we've seen, driven by China and emerging markets and so forth, removing an uncertainty factor from the market might be a good thing. And U.S. monetary policy at the moment, the market has no clarity whatsoever on what is the Fed's intention, what is the direction of monetary policy. So I think that in itself is causing a lot of uncertainty, and just maybe removing that,
might stabilize the markets further.
It might actually stabilize the market to some extent.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Very much appreciate your insight. Moving on now, a gala centered on ethical finance and Islamic finance took place in Dubai this week. Daniel Roth reports.
Can finance and ethics agree? This was the central question at the Efika, a gala held in Dubai to honor innovations in ethical finance. For this, the third such event, the focus was on ethical Islamic finance.
Islamic finance and ethical finance have a great deal of commonality. Islamic finance is faith-based and ethical finance is not, it's principle-based, but really in essence they're much the same thing. So we see a great deal of flowing from one to the other.
Since the global financial crisis of 2008 began, the need for a more ethical financial industry has been apparent. Mass movements have erupted around the world to denounce unjust banking systems and make strides toward alternatives. And it is within this context that Islamic finance has found its footing.
I think I made a big difference. We're trying to move the needle in the industry. We're now repositioning the concept of Islamic banking as the biggest stakeholder and proponent of ethical finance globally. This is the true value proposition in Islamic banking. It's all about ethics.
Indeed, the awards at the event focused on that link.
Some of the ideas that came about, for example, promoted the use of Islamic sukuks in building schools for the needy. Some of the solutions that also use Islamic sukuks to finance healthcare initiatives in Africa, like vaccinations.
The so-called halal economy is giant, consisting of everything from pork-free products to financial services and tourism. And as the Muslim community grows, this sector grows too. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, a Saudi-based group, estimates that the halal market is worth $2.3 trillion today.
And now for the stories we didn't want you to miss. We're joined on set by Daniel Roth. Thanks for joining us today. So what did you bring?
Well, the first story is one that is shocking, but maybe not surprising. Reuters this week reported that 500 largest American corporations have about $2.1 trillion of profits offshore, meaning they're not paying taxes on this money. It's out of the reach of American authorities. And these are American companies that a lot of people argue ought to be paying taxes.
Who are these companies?
These are companies like Apple, like GE, like the big names, Google. These are big name companies. Now, altogether, we're talking about $620 billion in taxes that should be paid from that money. This is an interesting number because this week also the Congressional Budget Office released their budget deficit, which is far less than that. It's about $460 billion. So that is to say that there would actually be a large budget surplus of well over $100 billion if these companies were paying their taxes. Now, this is on one side of the coin. On the other side, in the U.S., a new survey has found from MSNBC that about 28% of Americans have nothing in their savings accounts. Okay. 21% of Americans have no savings accounts. So you're talking about nearly half of Americans with no savings.
Well, perhaps it's not an American concept.
Well, that's the thing is all the time financial advisors are saying have 3 to 6 months in your pocket. Make sure you can get by. Now, it's not for lack of trying that people don't have the savings. It's primarily people don't have savings accounts because they don't have the ability to save. When minimum wages are the way they are in America, it becomes sort of uphill challenge to try to save that money.
And it is astonishing when we're seeing these major corporations somehow managing to put some of these taxes offshore. How did they manage that? What's the logistics there?
Well, for example, in the case of Apple, they were able to set up shop in Ireland and pay a very low tax rate there. So what they do is they essentially look for low tax rates or tax sheltered places where they don't have to pay any taxes, and they set up shop there sort of in a very thinly veiled way.
All right. Well, lastly, what's the last one you have for us?
This is some good news. Wind power in Germany and the UK have actually become the least expensive, best bang for your buck in terms of paying for power. So fossil fuels are no longer a good bet if you're looking to invest in those countries. In the U.S., too, we're seeing growth now. Solar renewable energy is about 5% of the market right now, but it's going up. Every year it's going up, and every year it's not coming up alongside fossil fuels. It's taking chunks out of that market. So a lot of advisors, particularly in this report from Bloomberg, they're saying, get your money out of fossil fuels while you can.
Interesting. And just the last word on this?
And the last word is that this is really beyond economics to environmental realities. It's not only good for your pocketbook, it's good for everyone's breathing.
Well, thank you very much for being with us today. Very much appreciate it. That wraps up our show today. Stay tuned to Every Day for all your global business coverage. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Thank you very much for watching.